or Leeds, really. NRL, as we were, David.
So I feel like an absolute charlatan now because I'm with Alan and Sarah. The NRL is completely dead to me. I haven't watched any NRL at all since the appalling behaviour over the World Cup, and I ought not to have picked this. Can I withdraw my choice of the Rabbitohs? And the only reason I picked them at all, Mark, was because I like the kit.
Yeah, that's fine. It knocks it down from 18% to 17.5% or something for them. I don't know what it is. 17%, let's say, for argument's sake. Not to say all is forgiven, but now that I've plotted out my 2021 World Cup in 2022 and booked some hotels, and you can go to the Super League Pod blog on superleaguepod.com, search for that. You'll see I've gone through the whole tournament, what games you can and can't get to at the same times and different times, and where you can put a trip together, and I've mapped out my own World Cup road trip. I'm excited about the World Cup. I've come to terms with it being this year rather than having been last year. So I'm good, and I'm going with the Panthers because they've got the best halfback combination still. So I think they'll still be the best side. That's the way I see it anyway. Overall, 18% slightly less than 18% of people now pick the Rabbitohs to be their NRL winners. The Storm, obviously always a strong contender in the NRL. 20% of people think that they will return to glory. The Panthers and the Roosters were the most favoured, 22% for each of those. By the way, guys, you weren't the only ones who didn't vote. A good number of people who voted on all the Northern Hemisphere fields didn't vote on this one. Those four clubs though that I just mentioned, the Panthers and the Roosters leading that way, were way ahead of the rest. The next closest was the Eels with 7%, and I think that's just because we've got a few Eels fans from down under that list. That might explain why the Cowboys got a pick from someone as well. The Dragons, the Raiders, and Seagulls, all those sides got at least one pick as well from people to win the NRL. But yeah, it was that those four sides. It should be a close race between those four, everyone expects. But we're not the experts on the NRL. So let's move on to the World Cup. The 2021 Rugby League World Cup is finally, as far as we know, definitely going ahead in 2022. So, as we did last year, this time, we can look forward to that competition and make our predictions. I don't know if anyone's changed what they've done last year. I should have looked this up and seen if the voting's gone decidedly differently any which way. But winner of the men's competition, who have you got, Alan?
I think I've definitely changed my vote, and I've gone quite parochial, and I have absolutely no shame in saying I hope England win it and rub their faces in it, to be frank. So England for me.
Yeah, Sarah's in the wall of white, thumping the chest, belting out the anthem as well with you there. I will be, but I don't think they're going to win the competition, sadly. So I've gone for Australia because it's got a miserable inevitability to it, it feels like. Just because there hasn't been enough international rugby league, has there? And the Australian players at least get Origin, which is an intensity level above again. And, most of the NRL is an intensity level above most of the Super League as well. So I just think that gives them the advantage. They've manipulated the system to be in their favour. With never playing against anyone else and then making sure they play against themselves. So yeah, sadly I think Australia will win it. What about you, David?
What you said, Mark. So I will be beating my chest with Alan and possibly Sarah and yourself, Mark, for England, and nobody will be more delighted than I. I will weep tears of joy if we finally get one over on Australia in a proper, meaningful competition. But sadly, I suspect the gits will just about get over the line.
Well, to cheer us up after thinking about Australia will win it, before we get like the doom of who's everyone else thinks is going to win it, someone thinks PNG will shock the world, which is delightful in my eyes. And someone else picked Wales. I presume they clicked on the wrong tick box. There's no other explanation. A measly 6% think New Zealand, Samoa, and Tonga will win. So not that those 6% think all of them will win, but they each got 6% of picks. So predictions-wise, it's level for Tonga, Samoa, and New Zealand from the SLP voters, which is interesting. England predicted to win by 21% of people. 58% of people predicting Australia win, though, however. Let's see if it's going to be any different in the Women's Rugby League World Cup. I've got tickets to quite a lot of the women's games now, actually, in the end. So I'm very excited about seeing all of those. Particularly excited about the game being moved to Wigan, so I don't have to watch a double header at Anfield with my shins being scratched. Who have you gone for in this one, Alan? Are you still patriotic?
No, I'm not.
Because you don't want to pick some talent, really.
Honestly, my genuine reason for not picking a home team, I suppose you could apply this to the men's team as well. It's just lack of competition at this level that I think England has been exposed to. So for me, it was between Australia and New Zealand, and I just can't pick those green and gold bastards. So I went for New Zealand.
I went for New Zealand too. I always feel when it comes to the internationals, the New Zealand team feels more like a team. I don't know if Australia will be doing some things this year to shift that about, but it just feels like whenever I've watched the two, the Kiwi Ferns against the Gillaroos, is that what they're called?
Yeah.
I can't remember if that was like a football team or a rugby team. But anyway, when I see Australia against New Zealand, I always feel like New Zealand seem more a team, and if the chips are down and it's normally a tough game, tougher than some of the games these women will play through the year, even in the women's NRL, I just fancy New Zealand in those situations to find something within them as a team. So I think New Zealand will win a close one by the time they get to the final, but I would love it to be Sarah's prediction of England, because I do love our England women's team. But David, who have you gone for?
I've very boringly gone for Australia on the grounds that they do play a lot more than we do. I think the one glimmer of hope England have is that the competition in the UK has got so much better over the last 2 years. So it could be, whilst we haven't really competed against Australia and New Zealand in recent times, it could be there might just be a surprise in this competition yet, and maybe England will get up, but for the sake of my predictions, anyway, I've said Australia.
Yeah, do you know what? Actually, yeah, because we've probably played a bit more than them recently. And what I would say about our women is, okay, it's mostly through sending them all to St. Helens, but there's become a lot more of a professionalism. They're not professionals, they're still amateurs and stuff like that, but the elite training setup for the England women's players is superb now, and way ahead of where it was the last time we hosted a Women's World Cup in this country. The support behind it will be bigger because the profile was raised by attaching it to the Super League product, by attaching a lot of the women's teams to the big Super League teams as well. We know the personalities. On this show, could we have really talked too much about, I guess, Gemma Walsh, Andrea Dobson? They'd have been about back then 8 years ago, well, 9 years ago now, but we couldn't have really pulled them out of the lineup. But now I could, I'd recognise players that are on the fringe of the England side, not just the ones that are nailed on to start for the England side. There has been a big advancement in it, and so I think I think we should be optimistic. And do you know, I'm not changing my pick, but I really do think that if we get behind this women's side in this World Cup, they do have a really strong chance. And 20% of the predictions we got were that England will win it, so that's fantastic. 24% are with me and Alan in the New Zealand camp of predictions. 53% think Australia will win the Women's World Cup. PNG again got one pick, and it wasn't the same person who took them in the men's, so that's nice. And then the person who's lost control of the mouse at this point picked Brazil.
I'd like to see the odds of a Brazil PNG World Cup double. That
Imagine if that was the same person who picked it. Do you know what? I can find out.
Brilliant.
Yes.
No, they picked Tonga.
Yeah.
Oh well.
See, Tonga's a sensible choice.
In the men's, yeah. Okay, wheelchair World Cup now, and I think wheelchair rugby league is something everyone's fallen in love with to an extent, and the most meaningful rugby league internationals that we saw in the world of rugby league in 2021 were the wheelchair internationals between England and France, because you had number 1 and number 2 in the world taking each other on over a multiple match series. And, how great was that? And I think that series, as much as anything else, has set up the voting in this, because the predictions do paint a largely two-horse race. David, let's start with your prediction, please.
So I'm saying England to win, to improve on and learn from that series they had against France, and with home advantage and the crowd behind them to bring home the World Cup.
What say you, Alan?
I picked France last time, and I was sticking with it, having seen them. What a brilliant team the French wheelchair team is. Completely inspirational as a performance. As you said, those matches in the autumn were absolutely brilliant watches. Obviously I saw a fair bit of kind of England players playing for their kind of domestic teams earlier in the year, but and I thought they were good. But some of these French players are just like on another level. So I went for France. Just to pick somebody different. 3 different winners. I really love it if we had 3 different nations winning 3 World Cups.
You know what? I'd really love it if we had one nation winning all 3 World Cups, and that nation be England. But like you, having watched those internationals last year, France, having come off not having the same amount of domestic games that England had, and I was so impressed by so many of the England players. When we watched them play Wales, and we were thinking, God, these guys are a cut above. And then we saw France play us, and we were like, oh my God, if we're that much better than Wales, that much better than France. So I think France, but I'd love it to be England. There was only 3 teams that got any picks at all in this tournament. Australia got 8%. I assume they were all Australians who haven't watched how good England and France are. 44% predicted France to win, and 48% predicted England to win. And I can't argue really with that too much. I think if it's not an England-France final, something's gone weird along the way, I would think, based on what we've seen last year and also the rankings and previous World Cups and stuff. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
But I can't wait. The one thing about England's pathway through to the final is they're playing all their games in London, aren't they? Which means they can get a bigger crowd in, I think. I hope. I think it's still at the Copper Box, isn't it going to be?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But will it be as much a rugby league crowd, or will it be people who are there going, "Oh, look at this! This is," do you know what I mean? And not really knowing when to cheer, when to put the pressure on the opposition and that sort of stuff. Whereas the games in Sheffield, you'd think will have a bit more of a rugby league audience there.
Well, I said last time how surprised I was how many people were in Gillingham watching
Yeah.
watching it. So obviously that's not a